Not far from this reconstructed Fort Phil Kearny in northern Wyoming, the U.S. military experienced its worst defeat in the Indian War to date. It was reconstructed because Indians under the leadership of Red Cloud and Oglala Sioux burned down the original after its abandonment, along with other forts on the Bozeman Trail. The disaster occurred here at the site of this monument. In December of 1866, snow was on the Bighorns. It was a gloomy day, and woodcutters were gathering the necessary fuel for the fort's operations. Suddenly, the woodcutters came under attack by a small Sioux raiding party. When word of the attack reached the fort, its commander, Colonel Henry B. Carrington, sent Captain William J. Fetterman to protect the woodcutters and the wagons. Carrington ordered Fetterman not to pursue the raiding party, as this was a common ambush tactic used by the Indians. However, Fetterman ignored his orders and chased after the raiding party. He chased the party over this ridge into a trap. On what would become known as Massacre Hill, upwards of 1,000 Sioux and Cheyenne warriors rose up from hiding and attacked the patrol. Fetterman's command of 81 men was completely wiped out. Fetterman and another captain, Frederick H. Brown, reportedly shot each other simultaneously in the head at the end of the battle. The Indians had lost 63 warriors with nearly 100 wounded. Ironically, 2 civilians using repeating Henry rifles killed and wounded most of these Indians. The leader of the ambush was a Minneconjou Sioux, Chief High Backbone. The battle also launched the military career of the famous Sioux warrior Crazy Horse. When the battle was over, as Shivington's men had done to the dead Cheyenne at Sand Creek, the Sioux mutilated Fetterman and his men, scalping, hacking off limbs, and disemboweling the dead soldiers. A tough winter followed for the troops at Fort Phil Kearny, Fort C.F. Smith, Fort Reno, and Fort Laramie. The Indians, expecting the usual retaliation, dispersed. But when none materialized, they resumed raiding forts along the Bozeman Trail. Then on August 2nd, 1867, the wagon box fight took place. This battle contained a tactical lesson for Red Cloud's army.
They removed the wagon boxes from the running gear, or the chassis if you prefer, of the wagons, and arranged these in an oval into which they herded the livestock at night to protect them from Indian depredations. On the morning of August 2nd, 1867, probably about 7 to 8 o'clock, the defenders at the wagon box corral and the woodcutters and their escorts in the various cutting areas around the corral, probably anywhere from a half a mile to a mile distant, were attacked by a large body of mainly Sioux warriors. In the fight that ensued for the next several hours, the defenders positioned inside the wagon box corral were able to very successfully repel 3 or possibly even 4 assaults by the Indian warriors. The advantage that the defenders brought to this particular fight was the Springfield Allen breech-loading rifle with which they had been recently issued. What the Springfield Allen breech loader, the advantage of that is that the top of the breech is opened and a cartridge is inserted into the chamber. The breech closed, the weapon is cocked, and then fired. As opposed to the muzzle loading weapon, where the bullet and the powder have to be inserted into the barrel of the weapon, rammed home, and then the weapon is cocked and fired. So the breech-loading weapon meant that the defenders were able to put out a heavier volume of firepower than they would ordinarily have been able to do. And the Indians found this disconcerting and were unable to overcome it. A relief column arrived from the fort about 1 o'clock, 1:30 perhaps, and the Indians dispersed upon the arrival of the relief column. The Indian casualties ranged probably the 50 to 60 casualties is the most accurate. Army casualties, there were 3 killed and 2 wounded.
Washington now changed directions and called for a new peace conference to be held at Fort Laramie in the fall of 1867. Chief Red Cloud said he would not attend until the forts were abandoned along the Bozeman Trail. In a surprise move, they were. Red Cloud and his warriors burned the hated Fort Phil Kearny to the ground. Soon after, Red Cloud arrived at Fort Laramie in November of 1868 and signed one more peace treaty. So who was this Chief Red Cloud? Red Cloud was perhaps the most important Plains Indian leader in the 19th century. As a warrior chief, his tactics copied the Army's best strategies. He used decoys to draw cavalry patrols into ambushes. And like the cavalry, he established a supply depot so that his followers had a constant source of food, arms, and ammunition. And during attacks, his warriors worked together instead of pursuing individual honors. What was remarkable about Red Cloud was that in his 50s, after using war to obtain autonomy for his people, he wisely switched to politics as the only hope for Sioux freedom, even as others such as Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse were fighting the battle for the Black Hills. Using his prestige in the 1880s on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, he worked to obtain precious food and supplies for his people. Opposing the Ghost Dance movement, he understood that it would bring the Army to the reservation, which resulted in the massacre at Wounded Knee. Red Cloud died in 1909, still fighting for the dignity and self-reliance of the Lakota. The peace negotiated during the Second Laramie Treaty would last briefly until the next chapters of the battle for the Northern Plains, the fight for the Black Hills, and the demise of the Cheyenne.